Hello everyone, Skippy here, and welcome to One Piece episode 976. Directed by Tasuku Shimaya from his and Yutaka Nakashima's board, and supervised by Hirotaka Ito and Isaku Inoue. For the conclusion to the Oden Flashback that the anime has been on for a few months now, 976 looks extremely solid for the type of episode that it is, with some lovely and surprising storyboarding for both Nakashima and Shimaya being extremely present in the preview, which Shimaya seems to execute himself wonderfully on top of the always solid corrections from both Ito and Inoue that play to both of their own strengths while being surrounded by a couple of nice cuts of animation that get the job done. It overall just looks like a fun, good time when you take it all into consideration, so I'm pretty ready to dig into what this last flashback episode will have to offer. So will episode 976 successfully close the curtains on Oden's story before we head back to present times? Let's finish this history lesson and find out. This episode covers the remainder of chapter 973 and the first 5.5 pages of chapter 974. And if you were expecting much, if any filler, you'd be surprised at how close this episode sticks to the manga. This week we're treated to an episode that pretty much beat for beat follows the source material exceptionally close with very little in the way of added content or rearranged content. Unless you count us cutting back to the present a bit earlier than the manga did, which ends up being a bit jarring as a transition in hindsight, which we'll get to in the storyboard. And granted, it's not like this episode of all things needed that much more context going in compared to something like last episode, so it's not really too much of a worry, especially when I think a lot of the scenes are done a fair bit of justice anyways, and they don't dwell on too much for too long outside of the post-flashback recap, even though it covers the events that the manga recapped as well, making it a pitfall more of the source, which leads to the anime staff to creatively use prior footage, which will definitely help them for content to come in terms of saving sheets. So it may not be a textbook example of what we can usually expect from the Wano arc as far as extending beyond the manga, but it's still a pretty rock solid effort on that front all the same, and doesn't really skip a beat for me with both voice direction and OST. Bringing forth a fairly close but still enjoyable all the same interpretation of Oda's pages that the storyboard really does something more with. You'd think that with a storyboard like this that's split up into two halves by two different people, that there'd be some incongruity quality-wise. And I have to say that it's a line of thinking that's completely thrown out the window when you look at both Nakashima and Shimaya's respective sections here, as they both manage to complement each other flawlessly and never feel like they come from two different episodes. Which is mainly due to Shimaya executing it all as a director, I will admit, but whether it be Nakashima's now trademark red or different colored outlines of a character, or his surprising knack for transitions and sliding objects in and out of frame this time, or Shimaya's own experimental efforts that include taking cues from Komaki with a largely black and white space during you-know-who's flashback with nothing but the blood being colored, there's a lot of experimenting on both ends with this board, pouring in insane amounts of character that make even the smallest bits of the episode like Orochi's freakout to Kaido ooze with character. It may have a few small issues here and there like the flaccid transition back to the present, which I think could have been done better, and with footage that wasn't from prior episodes, but both Nakashima and one of the youngest staff members, Shimaya, are clearly both rapidly improving. And when complemented overall by some wonderful compositing from Shimaya, which helps distract from the fact that supervisors Inoue and Ito are still here but not in insane space due to some assistant supervision from Studio Peacock, 976 ends up being just the type of episode that I wanted it to be. It may be bogged down a bit by the source material mostly in regards to the back half, but it's certainly not perfect, but I had a pretty good time with this one all things considered, and it really showed me what these two staff members were capable of and how they continue to improve every single episode. And next week we really will finally lunge back into the present after months of Oden's life journey with episode 977. And as is the norm more or less with Hosoda's episodes, there's a distinct lack of real identity in compositing that is a bit worrying going in for such a huge plot beat. However, when the preview doesn't really show all that much in the grand scheme of things, and when Kenji Yokoyama's corrections are still as solid as ever, maybe it's really just barely a taste of what the end product will end up being. So I've definitely got my fingers crossed for this one. Anyways guys, that's it for now. I'm Skippy, and Ishizuka's new scenes in the opening are fucking insanely good, and I love them both so much.